Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome again to another podcast episode on Talk Architecture with your host Naziaty Muhammad Yaacob. Now, I'd like to start again with regard to this topic on you can't use the research framework or the processes in research to justify a design thesis. I have stated about the research framework, but I want to shift it away and start again with a three-part series on what is a design thesis and what's the difference between a design thesis and a final project at the end of 5 years, or a combination of the 4 years that you have studied in architecture, including the first degree. And what does it mean to have a final project in the fifth year? I have thought about this final project and the word design thesis, why there is the word thesis there. Actually, there should not be any argument, but if there is a difference between the final project and the design thesis, it is not in a sense that the design thesis follows a process that has to do with research. And categorically, I would say that a design thesis, like a final project, has some research in terms of the topic or the title of the research. But that is all. I mean, you could research some more by interviewing and getting primary data, by interviewing your client or the users of your project, doing case studies, going to places or similar places, or finding out more, just say a school, right? So you interview students or teachers. That is fine. That is to do with the topic. But the whole design thesis is not about proving, like in PhD or a doctoral thesis, a statement or a hypothesis. It is not that at all. A final project, number one, is usually decided by the student itself. That's quite common in all architecture school, where the student of architecture decide on what they want to do. Even though there are themes in that unit, they decide what exactly they want to do. They determine the site with a lot of guidance, perhaps from the tutor. They will determine the scope of work or the complexities of the design. And therein lies the difference. The complexities is the argument that we always make with regard to a design thesis, whether there's enough challenges to the thesis that warrant it to be a thesis. Now, all over the world, in many architecture schools, we use the word design thesis. We don't use the word final project. But I tend to want to look at final project again equal to design thesis. And when you use the word final project, this is a project that you decided the topic, but how you'll be guided and what are the themes that you will explore depends on also the studio master or the unit master of that year. So herein lies exactly what you need to determine from the outset, from the very beginning. There is enough there enough complexities with regard to any project. Now, a project that has to do with a prototype, meaning that you can place it in any site. You determine like the parameters of where this prototype could be. It's the closest to a project that has a problem statement or hypothesis. But that is not suitable for someone who's graduating and going to go into industry. We are looking at a context where you need to learn everything about the design thesis, which is on site and a particular site, on locality, and context specificity. That is an approach that gives you a lot of challenges. And it's not like, shall we say, not depending on the site. It depends on the site a lot. The lay of the land, the contours, the topography, the sun orientation, the wind flows, the site, whether it is right in the middle of the city, the transportation, the pedestrian flows or system around it, the drainage system, whether it's near rivers. And the more context that it has, the more challenges that it has in the middle of the city, the better. If you have a project that is not in the middle of the city or is in the suburbs, and it's very much to do with the building typology, it's not really complex as one that is right in the middle of the city or in urban situation where it's high density. You could add issues like a heritage area or conservation area. You could add issues of urban poverty, congestion, or problems to do with urban design or even the master planning to help with getting, it's highly complex building, maybe a bigger scope, a university campus or part of it. You could have that highly complex design thesis. That is good enough to chew enough on a lot of design problems that you can address, like 10 to 12 design problems that you need to tackle in that academic calendar year. So, depending on the School of Architecture, the unit master, depending on whether you're serious about producing graduates who could be ready for the industry, because one thing that we know for sure that the industry expects certain level of competencies and expectations of the skills of the graduates. Apart from being able to master digital tools, the graduate would also be able to see challenges as something that's doable, and they know exactly what to do with regard to the scope and with regard to what it is. It is, if it's master planning or it is to do with an urban site or highly complex building. So what I'm trying to say is that it's up to the school whether they want graduates ready for the industry. And I'm also speaking about that sort of graduate and that sort of school. So if you're a school that is very theoretical and deals with prototypes or deals with fantasy sites and projections and speculations, then maybe I'm not really the best person for you to listen to, or maybe our conversation could be different. That's what I'm saying. So, in this first introduction to the whole design thesis process, you could understand where I'm coming from. What I would like to argue is that context specific projects with real site, real clients, client users is the one that is enough or good enough to be preparing the graduate to go into the industry. And in a certain way, questions are asked about the design problem. If you were to do a school, just say a secondary school or a high school, in a particular site that is targeted for a school to be designed in, and you have already the complexities of the neighborhood and transportation and how you would need to go into case studies and interview the teachers and the students of another school, you might come up with a lot of design problems, such as how the classroom should be designed in a way that is more flexible and adaptable to the teaching curriculum. Or you'd like to look at how social interactions are very, very important in schools and how the school should be designed. But then you also have all these other design problem, which is on site, where the entrance is, what are the problems in terms of traffic control, where people drop off the children at school, what are the issues that you need to address to do with the school, apart from the typology of the classroom and study area. You could go into laboratories and real life conundrums of a school. We have had students doing vocational schools before, a technical school, right in the middle of the city where there is poverty and urban poor issues in that area, and how the school open up, like a vocational school open up to the neighborhood, and the workshops in that school is part of the landscape of the neighborhood, is where the neighborhood can have repairs or done things, and there's some commercialization aspect to the school. So such a site is great. A site or a neighborhood that gives you a lot of opportunities to do design problems is great. So your research is really action research, or research is on the ground, and observations and participant observation or direct observation you can do on the ground at the site and find out more with different users, the aspirations of the neighborhood. At the same time, you can find out about the curriculum that the country has on vocational schools, and even interview people who design the curriculum. I mean, how deep can your design thesis be? You need to start somewhere, and you build up a narrative, and you come up with a narrative through evidence or through site conditions and situations that you find on the ground. In a highly complex situation like that, you will find a lot of design problems. And design problems is what define the solution that you're going to go after and come up with, at the end of the day, a design that is so compelling and real that you can even build it. You can even do details of a lot of things to do with environmental science problem, the windows, the doors, the labs, the classrooms. There's a lot that you could go through, because the process of you going through it is what is making you much more skilled at designing and at solving problems. And the core of the matter is an architecture student deals with designing to solve problems and reiterating, doing it again and again, and coming out with aesthetic solutions as well, materiality, composition, and so on. And that, in the end, they have to do some form making eventually, but a lot of it is problem solving, the design problems, which could be macro in scale or micro in scale, from the classroom design, the desk and chairs, and how it could be a flexible, adaptable design, to the whole building complex and how it sits in the master plan of the neighborhood. So you have so many design problems which you can tackle in that year. And that's how you have a design thesis. It's not like one problem statement saying that my design thesis of a school is so that the school will be a creative school. That's just one thing. What do you mean by being a school that is a creative school, a school that can adapt to the latest technology? What does it mean? It's so like a huge manifesto that it really is a manifesto for economists or planners or politicians, not the architect. So you want to have the architect actually, or the potential the graduate to be a potential architect to actually deal with architectural problems. So that is, in a nutshell, the beginning of the discussion, the first part of the series. I would like to talk about this in more detail, and I would refer to certain, shall we say, statements and documentation on this issue. I would have the discussion on prototypes and certain projects that I've come across and had been fortunate or lucky, or I had been able to be part of the studio master's team to have to deal with such projects that we had earlier. I've mentioned about sites and how getting together also the best way for students of architecture to learn from each other while identifying a particular site. And there are two particular sites that we did with students of architecture, one with the urban poverty issue and another with abandoned sites of an old neighborhood. So we're going to talk about context specificity again, being the answer, being the only way to get students of architecture to be ready, to be equipped, to be going into the industry, because that's the way the industry is, that you have to deal with such projects. And if you are into speculative design, into prototypes, into fantasy design, you will not be able to overcome the challenges of the industry or take some time to actually be able to tackle the rough and ready challenges that is posed by the industry out there. So this is the first part of the 3-part series, and I hope that you could understand where I'm coming at with regard to identifying design problems rather than giving a brushstroke statement based on some research that you've done. The site is very important and is very specific to how you're going to learn and challenge yourself to be a graduate architect. Yeah, thank you very much for listening to the first part of this 3-part series.